poor little black boy with twins girls begged for food, unaware he'd approached a billionaire CEO. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk as 10-year-old Malik adjusted his grip on his twin sister's small hands. Maya's stomach growled loudly, breaking the silence that had settled over the three children like a heavy blanket. Mila whimpered softly, her legs trembling as she tried to keep up with her brother's determined pace. "Almost there," Malik whispered, though his own voice shook with uncertainty. The Haven table's bright yellow sign came into view, its cheerful colors a stark contrast to the gray exhaustion etched across the children's faces. They had been walking since dawn, their worn sneakers making soft shuffling sounds against the concrete. Malik's heart raced as they approached the soup kitchen. Yesterday, he had overheard Mrs. Rodriguez from apartment 3B telling her husband about this place, how they served warm meals and didn't ask too many questions. His sisters hadn't eaten a proper meal in 2 days, surviving only on the half-stale crackers he had found in their empty kitchen cabinet. "Malik, I'm tired," Maya said, tugging at his oversized jacket. Her voice was barely above a whisper, and dark circles shadowed her 7-year-old eyes. "Me too," Mila echoed, her twin sister's exhaustion mirrored in her own pale face. I know," Malik said, crouching down to their level. He forced a smile, the same brave expression he had been wearing for weeks. "But look, we're first in line. That means we'll get the best food, okay?" The twins nodded, their trust in their big brother absolute and heartbreaking. Across the street, a figure in a navy baseball cap and worn denim jacket observed the scene through the window of a small coffee shop. Gavin Ellis took a slow sip of his black coffee, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the three children huddled together near the soup kitchen's entrance. Something about the boy's protective stance, the way he positioned himself between his sisters and the world, stirred something deep in Gavin's chest. As one of the wealthiest men in the country, Gavin had seen countless reports about the Haven table. His private foundation had been quietly funding the soup kitchen network for over 3 years, pouring millions into what was supposed to be a seamless operation. On paper, everything looked perfect, feeding over 200 families daily, maintaining excellent public relations, and receiving glowing reviews from city officials. But today, something felt different. Today, he wasn't reviewing spreadsheets or listening to polished presentations. Today, he was watching real children wait for real food. The soup kitchen's doors opened with a metallic creak, and a middle-aged woman with perfectly styled hair and a crisp apron stepped out. Ms. Kendra Williams had been running the Haven table for 5 years, and her reputation for efficiency was well known throughout the charitable community. "Good morning, everyone," she announced, her voice carrying the practiced cheerfulness of someone accustomed to managing crowds. "Before we begin serving, I need to check our pre-registration list." Malik straightened up, his hand instinctively tightening around his sister's fingers. He had no idea what pre-registration meant, but he sensed it wasn't good news. "Williams family?" Ms. Kendra called out, scanning her clipboard. "Here." A woman near the back of the line raised her hand. "Johnson family?" "Present." One by one, Ms. Kendra worked through her list while Malik's anxiety grew. He hadn't heard any mention of registration yesterday. Mrs. Rodriguez had simply said they served food to hungry children. "Excuse me," Malik said, stepping forward when Ms. Kendra finished her roll call. His voice cracked slightly, but he forced himself to continue. We're here for breakfast. For my sisters." Ms. Kendra looked down at him with a mixture of annoyance and pity. "I'm sorry, sweetie, but I don't see your name on our list. The Haven table operates on a pre-registration system to ensure we can properly serve our established families." "But we're hungry," Malik said, his carefully maintained composure beginning to crack. "My sisters haven't eaten since." "I understand that, dear, but we have policies for a reason," Ms. Kendra interrupted, her tone becoming firmer. "If you'd like to apply for our services, you'll need to have a parent or guardian fill out the proper paperwork. We can't just serve anyone who shows up." Maya began to cry softly, the sound cutting through the morning air like a knife. Mila joined her, their synchronized sobs breaking Malik's heart all over again. "Please," Malik begged, his pride crumbling as he watched his sisters' faces crumple with disappointment. "They're just little kids. Can't you make an exception? Just this once?" Ms. Kendra's expression softened slightly, but she shook her head. "I'm sorry, but rules are rules. We have to think about our other families and our funding requirements. Come back with proper documentation." Across the street, Gavin's jaw tightened as he watched the scene unfold. His coffee had grown cold in his hands, forgotten as he witnessed his millions of dollars in funding fail 3 hungry children in real time. The other families in line shuffled uncomfortably, some avoiding eye contact while others whispered among themselves. A few looked genuinely sympathetic, but no one spoke up. No one challenged the system that was turning away 3 of the most vulnerable people in the city. Malik felt the weight of failure crushing down on his small shoulders. He had promised his sisters food, had walked them across the city on empty stomachs, had filled them with hope, and now he had nothing to show for it except their tears. "Come on," he whispered to Maya and Mila, gently pulling them away from the line. "We'll figure something else out." As the 3 children walked away, their heads hung low with defeat, Gavin Ellis made a decision that would change everything. He pulled out his phone and began typing notes, documenting everything he had just witnessed. The real story behind his charitable investment was finally beginning to reveal itself. And it was nothing like the reports had promised. The abandoned apartment building on Elm Street looked like it might collapse at any moment. Paint peeled from its walls like old skin, and several windows were boarded up with plywood that had turned gray with age. But for Malik and his sisters it was home, or at least, it was all they had left. Malik pushed open the heavy door to apartment 2C, the hinges screaming in protest. The small space was barely warmer than the hallway, with only a thin blanket draped over the cracked window to keep out the worst of the cold. Maya and Mila collapsed onto the threadbare couch, their small bodies shaking with exhaustion and hunger. "I'm sorry," Malik whispered, kneeling beside them. I thought they would help us." He couldn't bring himself to tell them about the registration requirement. How could he explain that their hunger wasn't valid enough, that their desperation didn't qualify them for help? Instead, he rummaged through their nearly empty kitchen, finding half a sleeve of saltine crackers and a small jar of peanut butter with maybe 2 spoonfuls left. "Here," he said, carefully spreading the tiniest amount of peanut butter on each cracker. "It's not much, but... Where's Mama?" Mila asked suddenly, her voice small and scared. Malik's hands froze. He had been dreading this question for days, knowing it would come eventually. Their mother had been in the hospital for 2 weeks now, something about her heart and blood pressure that Malik didn't fully understand. The doctors said she needed surgery, but there were complications, delays, insurance problems he couldn't grasp. She's getting better," he said finally, the lie tasting bitter in his mouth. "She'll be home soon." What he couldn't tell them was that Child Protective Services had already been asking questions. Mrs. Patterson from next door had mentioned seeing social workers in the building, looking for children who might be living alone. Malik knew that if they were discovered, the 3 of them would be separated, placed in different foster homes across the city. He'd heard the stories from other kids at school, brothers and sisters torn apart, lost in a system that didn't care about keeping families together. So he had made a choice. They would stay hidden, stay together, and survive until their mother came home. Even if it meant going hungry. 20 blocks away, Gavin Ellis sat in his downtown penthouse office, but his mind was still on Elm Street, still seeing those 3 small faces crumpled with disappointment. He had spent the afternoon making calls, digging deeper into the Haven Table's operations. "Sir?" His assistant Rachel knocked softly on his door. "I have those reports you requested." Gavin looked up from his laptop, where he had been reviewing months of financial statements. "What did you find?" "The Haven Table has been operating with a 98% efficiency rating according to their quarterly reports," Rachel said, setting a thick folder on his desk. "They claim to serve an average of 847 meals per day, with a client satisfaction rate of 97%. And the pre-registration system? Implemented 18 months ago, supposedly to streamline services and prevent food waste. Rachel read from her notes. Ms. Kendra Williams reported that it has improved their ability to plan portions and maintain quality control. Gavin leaned back in his chair, something cold settling in his stomach. Rachel, I want you to do something for me. Call around to other soup kitchens in the area. Ask them about their registration policies. Of course, sir. Is there a particular reason? Just curious about industry standards, Gavin said, though they both knew he was rarely just curious about anything. An hour later, Rachel returned with interesting news. Sir, I called 12 other soup kitchens in the metropolitan area. Only 2 others require pre-registration, and both of them have same-day registration available. Most of them operate on a first-come, first-served basis. Gavin nodded slowly, pieces of a puzzle beginning to form in his mind. Rachel, clear my schedule for tomorrow morning. I'm going to pay a visit to the Haven table. Shall I arrange a meeting with Ms. Williams? No, Gavin said, a plan beginning to take shape. I think I'll drop by as a volunteer. Someone mentioned they're always looking for extra help. That evening, as Malik tucked his sisters into the single bed they all shared, he made them a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. Tomorrow will be better, he whispered, pulling the thin blanket up to their chins. I'll find us food tomorrow, okay? Maya and Mila nodded sleepily, their trust in their big brother unwavering despite the day's disappointments. As they drifted off to sleep, Malik stared at the ceiling, his mind racing with plans and possibilities. He had to find a way to feed them, had to keep them safe and hidden until their mother returned. What he didn't know was that across town, a billionaire was making plans of his own, plans that would change everything for 3 hungry children who had been forgotten by the very system designed to help them. The next morning would bring new challenges, new revelations, and the beginning of a confrontation that would shake the Haven table to its very foundation. Gavin Ellis stood outside the Haven table at 6:30 a.m., wearing clothes he had borrowed from his building's maintenance staff. The worn jeans and faded flannel shirt felt foreign against his skin, but he needed to blend in. A baseball cap pulled low over his eyes completed the disguise of Eli Thompson, a concerned community member looking to volunteer. You're early, Ms. Kendra said when she arrived to unlock the building. She looked him up and down with the practiced eye of someone used to evaluating volunteers. Most people don't show up until after 9. I believe in being punctual, Gavin replied, adopting a slightly rougher accent. The name's Eli. I called yesterday about helping out. Right, yes. Well, we can always use extra hands. Ms. Kendra unlocked the door, and Gavin followed her inside. The work isn't glamorous, mostly serving food and cleaning up. But it's rewarding. As they prepared for the morning rush, Gavin watched Ms. Kendra organize her clipboard with military precision. Every name was color-coded, with detailed notes about family sizes and dietary restrictions. It was impressively thorough, and completely exclusive. How do families get on this list? Gavin asked casually as he helped arrange folding chairs. They have to apply through our intake process, Ms. Kendra explained proudly. Background checks, proof of residence, income verification. We've really streamlined things since implementing the system. No more chaos, no more waste. What about emergency cases? Kids who show up hungry but aren't registered? Ms. Kendra's expression hardened slightly. We can't help everyone, Eli. If we did, we'd be overrun. The registration system helps us maintain our reputation and satisfy our donors. They want to see organized, measurable results, not a free-for-all. At 7 a.m. sharp, the doors opened, and the approved families began filing in. Gavin served eggs and toast with a smile, making mental notes about everything he observed. The families were grateful, the food was decent, and the operation ran smoothly. On the surface, it looked exactly like the success story in his quarterly reports. Then, at 8:15 a.m., Malik appeared in the doorway. Gavin's breath caught as he recognized the boy from yesterday, but Malik looked even worse now. His sisters weren't with him this time, and his eyes held a desperate determination that made Gavin's chest tighten. Excuse me, Malik said, approaching Ms. Kendra with careful politeness. I know you said we needed registration, but I was wondering, could I work for food? I could wash dishes, sweep floors, take out trash. I'm a good worker. Ms. Kendra barely looked up from her clipboard. I'm sorry, but that's not how we operate. We have professional standards to maintain. Please, Malik pressed, his voice cracking. My sisters are so hungry. I'll do anything. I'll work all day if you just give them one meal. Young man, I told you yesterday. What if I brought documentation? Malik interrupted desperately. What papers do I need? I can get whatever you want. Ms. Kendra sighed with exaggerated patience. You need a parent or guardian to fill out the application. Adults only. That's the rule. Gavin watched Malik's face crumble as the words hit him. The boy's shoulders sagged with defeat, and for a moment, he looked far older than his 10 years. I can't bring my mom right now, Malik whispered. She's sick. But my sisters. Then you'll have to wait until she's better, Ms. Kendra said firmly. I'm sorry, but we simply cannot make exceptions. As Malik turned to leave, Gavin made a quick decision. He grabbed a paper bag and began filling it with rolls, fruit, and leftover bacon from the serving line. Eli, what are you doing? Ms. Kendra asked sharply. Just cleaning up some leftovers, Gavin said innocently. Didn't want them to go to waste. He followed Malik outside, catching up with the boy in the alley behind the building. Hey, kid! Malik spun around, his eyes wary. I wasn't causing trouble. I'll leave. You weren't causing trouble, Gavin said gently, holding out the bag. And you don't have to leave. This is for you and your sisters. Malik stared at the bag like it might disappear. I can't pay you. I'm not asking you to pay. I'm asking you to take care of those little girls. Gavin crouched down to Malik's level. What's your name, son? Malik. Well, Malik, my name is Eli. And I think what's happening in there is wrong. Malik clutched the bag of food, tears streaming down his face. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you so much. As they talked, Gavin learned about their mother's hospitalization, their fear of being separated, and Malik's impossible burden of keeping them safe and fed. Each detail made Gavin's anger at the system burn hotter. Malik, Gavin said carefully, how many other kids like you have been turned away from that place? I don't know, Malik said. But yesterday I saw another family get sent away too. And last week, Mrs. Garcia from my building said they wouldn't help her either. That afternoon, Gavin spent hours walking the neighborhood, talking to families. What he discovered made his blood boil. The Haven table was turning away dozens of families, immigrants afraid to provide documentation, single parents working multiple jobs who couldn't navigate the bureaucracy, and children like Malik who were trying to survive on their own. Meanwhile, the registered families were often middle-class people who could afford food but chose free meals to stretch their budgets. The system wasn't helping the most vulnerable, it was helping the most organized. That evening, Gavin sat in his penthouse, staring at photographs he had secretly taken of turned-away families. His foundation was funding a system that was failing the people who needed it most, all while maintaining perfect statistics and glowing reviews. It was time for a change. A big one. 3 days later, Gavin arrived at the Haven table for his morning volunteer shift, but something felt wrong the moment he walked through the door. The usual bustle of preparation was replaced by hushed conversations and worried glances. Ms. Kendra stood near the serving line, speaking in urgent whispers to another staff member. What's going on? Gavin asked, maintaining his Eli persona. That boy who keeps coming around, Ms. Kendra said, her voice tight with anxiety. The one with the twin sisters. Someone called Child Protective Services about them yesterday. Gavin's blood turned to ice. What happened? They were living alone in some condemned building on Elm Street. Can you believe it? No adult supervision at all. Ms. Kendra shook her head disapprovingly. Honestly, it's probably for the best. Those children needed proper care. Where are they now? Gavin asked, fighting to keep his voice steady. Emergency foster placement. The twins went to one family, the boy to another. That's how it works when there's no available home that can take all three. The words hit Gavin like a physical blow. Separated. The one thing Malik had feared most had come to pass, and it was partially Gavin's fault. If he had acted sooner, moved faster, found a way to help them properly. Did anyone try to keep them together? He asked. Ms. Kendra looked at him strangely. Eli, these children were living in dangerous conditions. The system knows what's best for them. But Gavin knew better. He had spent the last 3 days documenting everything. The families turned away, the bureaucratic barriers, the way his millions of dollars were being used to maintain an exclusive club rather than feed hungry children. And now the boy who had trusted him was paying the ultimate price. That afternoon, Gavin Ellis walked into his boardroom for an emergency meeting he had called with the Haven Table's board of directors. But this time, he wasn't hiding behind borrowed clothes and a fake name. He wore his best suit, his steel gray eyes cold with determination. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to commanding rooms full of powerful people. I'm sure you're wondering why I've called this meeting. Ms. Kendra sat at the far end of the table, looking nervous but defiant. She had no idea who Gavin really was. To her, he was still just Eli Thompson, the volunteer who had been asking too many questions. I want to discuss the recent performance of the Haven Table program. Gavin continued, clicking a remote that brought up a presentation on the large screen behind him. Specifically, I want to talk about how it's failing the children it's supposed to serve. The first slide showed a photograph of Malik, Maya, and Mila standing outside the Haven Table, their faces etched with hunger and disappointment. This is Malik Rodriguez and his twin sisters, Maya and Mila. They approached the Haven Table 4 days ago, desperate for food. They were turned away because their names weren't on a pre-registration list. Ms. Kendra's face went pale as she recognized the image. How did you get that photograph? I took it, Gavin said simply. Along with these. More slides flashed across the screen, families being turned away, children crying, parents pleading with staff members who cited policy and procedure instead of offering help. You see, I've been volunteering at the Haven Table for the past week, conducting what you might call an undercover investigation into how our charitable funds are being used. Our funds? Ms. Kendra asked, confusion evident in her voice. Gavin smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Allow me to properly introduce myself. I'm Gavin Ellis, CEO of Ellis Technologies and founder of the Ellis Foundation, the organization that has been funding the Haven Table program for the past 3 years. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Ms. Kendra's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and finally, terror. Mr. Ellis, she stammered. I had no idea you were. Of course you didn't, Gavin interrupted. Because you were too busy maintaining your precious statistics to notice that you were failing the very people we're supposed to help. He clicked to the next slide, showing financial reports and efficiency ratings. On paper, the Haven Table looks perfect. 98% efficiency, high client satisfaction, excellent public relations. But these numbers don't tell the real story. The real story, Gavin explained, was a system that prioritized image over impact, bureaucracy over basic human compassion. A system that turned away desperate children while serving free meals to people who could afford to pay for their own food. As of today, Gavin announced, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade, I am immediately suspending all funding to the Haven Table program pending a complete audit and restructuring. Ms. Kendra shot to her feet. You can't do this. We have families depending on us. Yes, we do, Gavin agreed. Families like the Rodriguez children, who are now separated in different foster homes because the system failed them when they needed help most. He clicked to a final slide showing Malik's crayon drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a tree labeled Safe Place. This is what Malik drew for me 3 days ago. He called it their safe place, a place where he and his sisters could be together and taken care of. Instead of providing that safe place, our program drove them deeper into the shadows until they were torn apart. Gavin closed his laptop and looked around the room at the shocked faces staring back at him. The Haven table, as it currently operates, ends today. Ms. Williams, you're fired. The rest of you have 48 hours to present me with a plan for real change, or I'll find people who can. As the board members filed out in stunned silence, Gavin remained behind, staring at Malik's drawing on the screen. The boy had trusted him, and he had failed. But failure, Gavin had learned long ago, was just the first step towards something better. It was time to build the safe place Malik had dreamed of. 2 weeks after shutting down the Haven table, Gavin Ellis stood in a converted warehouse on the south side of the city, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on something unprecedented. The space buzzed with activity, carpenters installing long wooden tables, electricians hanging warm pendant lights, and volunteers painting murals on the walls that depicted families sharing meals together. "Mr. Ellis," Rachel called out, navigating around a stack of donated chairs. "The mobile kitchen units have arrived, and the first neighborhood coordinators are here for training." Gavin nodded, his attention focused on a small easel near the entrance where Malik's crayon drawing had been carefully framed and displayed. The simple sketch of 3 children under a tree had become the unofficial logo of what he was calling the Ellis Initiative, a complete reimagining of how charitable food programs should work. "Any word on the Rodriguez children?" Gavin asked, though he knew the answer would be the same as it had been every day for 2 weeks. "The family court is still processing the reunification request," Rachel said gently. "These things take time, especially when children are placed in different homes." Time. It was the one thing Gavin couldn't buy, couldn't fast-track with money or influence. While he was building a revolution in charitable giving, 3 children were waking up each morning in strange beds, surrounded by strangers, wondering if they would ever see each other again. The Ellis Initiative was everything the Haven table wasn't. Instead of requiring registration, it operated on radical accessibility. Anyone who was hungry could walk in and be fed, no questions asked. Instead of one central location, mobile kitchens would rotate through underserved neighborhoods, bringing food directly to people who couldn't travel across the city. Instead of turning away families, the program actively sought out the most vulnerable populations. "Sir," a young woman approached, carrying a tablet. "I'm Maria Santos, the new program director. I wanted to update you on our outreach efforts." Maria was everything Ms. Kendra hadn't been: young, passionate, and driven by genuine compassion rather than bureaucratic efficiency. She had grown up in these neighborhoods, understood the barriers that kept families from seeking help. "We've identified 47 families in the past week who were previously turned away from traditional programs," Maria reported. "Undocumented immigrants, single parents working multiple jobs, elderly residents who can't stand in long lines, and several teenagers living independently." "What about emergency protocols?" Gavin asked. "We've partnered with the Children's Hospital and 3 family service agencies. Any child who approaches us without a guardian gets immediate care and appropriate support, but our first priority is keeping families together whenever possible." That last part was crucial. Gavin had spent hours with family lawyers, social workers, and child advocates, designing a system that wrapped support around struggling families instead of tearing them apart. The Ellis Initiative would provide not just food, but housing assistance, job training, childcare, and legal support, everything needed to help families stabilize rather than collapse. "The first mobile unit launches tomorrow," Maria continued. "We're starting with the Elm Street area." Gavin's chest tightened. Elm Street, where Malik had tried so desperately to keep his family together in that crumbling apartment building. It felt right to begin there, in the neighborhood where this whole transformation had started. "I want to be there," Gavin said. "Of course, sir. But there's one more thing." Maria hesitated. "The media attention has been incredible. 3 news stations want to cover the launch, and the mayor's office has requested a meeting about expanding citywide." In the 2 weeks since shutting down the Haven table, word had spread quickly about Gavin's dramatic intervention. The story had everything journalists loved: a billionaire going undercover, systemic corruption exposed, and a heartwarming mission to help hungry children. But Gavin knew the real test wasn't media coverage or support. The real test was whether they could prevent another family from being torn apart the way the Rodriguez children had been. That evening, Gavin drove to the foster home where Malik was staying. Through the window, he could see the boy sitting alone at a kitchen table, staring at homework he wasn't completing. The 10-year-old looked smaller somehow, diminished by separation from the sisters he had protected so fiercely. Gavin wanted to go inside, to tell Malik about the new program, about the safe place they were building in his honor. But he knew that would be cruel, offering hope when the legal system might not allow the family to reunite for months, if ever. Instead, he made a phone call to his lawyer. "Janet, I need you to pull every string, call in every favor. I don't care what it costs or how many people we have to convince. Those children belong together. Gavin, I've told you, family court doesn't move quickly even for billionaires." "Then we change the system," Gavin said firmly. "We prove that keeping families together works better than tearing them apart. We show them data, success stories, whatever they need to see." As he drove away from the foster home, Gavin passed the old Haven Table building, now dark and empty with a "for lease" sign in the window. In just 2 weeks, he had dismantled a system that had taken years to build. But destruction was the easy part. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, they would start proving that compassion could be more efficient than bureaucracy, that radical generosity could succeed where careful policies had failed. Tomorrow, they would open the first location that truly lived up to the name Malik had dreamed of, a safe place where families stayed together, where hungry children were fed without question, and where 3 stick figures holding hands under a tree wasn't just a child's drawing, but a promise kept. 6 weeks after that first devastating morning outside the Haven Table, Malik Rodriguez stepped out of a social worker's car and stared at the bright blue building that had replaced the old soup kitchen. Above the entrance, bold letters spelled out, "Malik's Table," and underneath, in smaller text, "A safe place for every family." His heart hammered against his ribs. Maya and Mila stood beside him, their small hands clutching his with the desperate grip of children who had learned not to trust that good things would last. The legal battle to reunite them had taken nearly a month, but Gavin's team of lawyers had finally convinced the court that keeping siblings together served the children's best interests better than the traditional foster system. "Is this really named after you?" Maya whispered, her eyes wide as she read the sign. Malik nodded, still unable to believe it himself. When the social worker had told him about the new program, about how the man called Eli was actually a billionaire who had shut down the old system because of what happened to their family, it had seemed impossible. Things like that didn't happen to kids like him. "Welcome," a warm voice said from the doorway. A young Latina woman with kind eyes and a bright smile approached them. "You must be the Rodriguez family. I'm Maria Santos, and we've been waiting for you." As they walked through the entrance, Malik saw his framed drawing displayed on an easel, and his breath caught. The simple sketch of 3 stick figures under a tree looked somehow more meaningful here, surrounded by the bustling activity of families sharing meals at long wooden tables. "You drew this?" Mila asked, reaching up to touch the frame. "I drew it for Eli," Malik said quietly. "I mean, for Mr. Ellis. And it inspired everything you see here," a familiar voice said behind them. Malik turned to see the man he had known as Eli, but now dressed in a crisp button-down shirt and slacks that probably cost more than Malik's family had spent on food in months. Gavin Ellis looked different in his real clothes, more commanding, but his eyes held the same gentle kindness that had made Malik trust him that day in the alley. "Mr. Ellis," Malik said formally, suddenly unsure how to act around someone so important. "Just Gavin," he said, crouching down to eye level with the twins. "And you must be Maya and Mila. I've heard so much about you." The girls pressed closer to Malik, still shy after weeks of separation and uncertainty. But Maya, always the braver of the two, stepped forward slightly. "Thank you for helping us be together again," she said in a small voice. Gavin's eyes misted over. "Thank you for reminding me what really matters." As they toured the facility, Malik marveled at how different everything was from the old Haven Table. There were no clipboards, No registration lines, no volunteers looking down at hungry children with pity or suspicion. Instead, families of all backgrounds sat together at communal tables, sharing not just food but conversation and laughter. "Anyone can come here?" Malik asked as they passed a station where volunteers were packing to-go meals for people who couldn't stay. "Anyone," Maria confirmed. "No paperwork, no questions about documentation or income. If you're hungry, you eat. If you need help, we find a way to help." They stopped at a bulletin board covered with photos: families who had been helped by the program, children who had found stable homes, parents who had gotten jobs through the initiative's training programs. In the center was a newspaper clipping with the headline, "Billionaire's Undercover Investigation Sparks Nationwide Reform in Charitable Food Programs." "Other cities are copying what we're doing here," Gavin explained. "The Ellis Initiative is expanding to 12 cities next year, and Congress is considering legislation to change how federally funded food programs operate." Malik stared at the article, trying to process that his family's story had somehow started a movement that would help children across the entire country. "Malik," Gavin said gently, "I want you to know that what happened to your family, the way you were turned away, the way you were separated, that will never happen here. This place exists to make sure no child ever has to choose between asking for help and staying with their family." As they sat down to their first meal together in over a month, Malik looked around the room and felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time: safety. Not just the physical safety of having food and shelter, but the deeper safety of knowing that there were people in the world who would fight for families like his. Maya and Mila giggled as they tried to decide between 3 different dessert options, their faces bright with the simple joy of being children again. Their mother, finally released from the hospital and sitting beside them, had tears streaming down her cheeks as she watched her babies laugh. "You know," Gavin said quietly to Malik as they watched the twins debate the merits of chocolate cake versus apple pie, "I used to think charity was about writing checks and attending fundraisers. You taught me that real change happens when we actually see the people we're trying to help." Malik looked up at the man who had kept his promise, who had turned a child's crayon drawing into a movement that would feed thousands of families. "Thank you," he said simply, "for seeing us." As the camera crews outside captured footage of families entering and leaving Malik's table, no one turned away, no one asked to prove their worthiness. The boy who had once begged for scraps sat surrounded by abundance, his sisters safe beside him, finally home in the safe place he had dreamed into existence.